This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is an awesome all-in-one platform that lets you build a beautiful online presence and run your business. I spend a lot of time on and off the internet looking at art and meeting artists, and there are a few habits that I constantly come across that, in my opinion, let's say, make the art world a less enjoyable place than it could be. So today we're gonna talk about 4 absolutely annoying artists' habits that we all better get rid of, and along with that you can watch me paint a small portrait study which actually turned out to be one of my recent favorites. So without further ado, let's start with number 1 on the list. The extraordinary life. So number 1 on the list of annoying artist habits that artists across the whole spectrum seem to exhibit is sharing their extraordinary and exciting lives on the internet for everyone to see. So I'm sure if you are watching this video, you are at least somewhat interested in art. Well, then I'm sure you're also used to seeing the posts of your favorite artists and all the amazing things they are doing. Traveling around the world, eating out in great restaurants, meeting exciting people in exciting places, and the list goes on. And sometimes, maybe, if you're really lucky, they even show you what they're working on. I mean, that's how things are these days. It's probably not an exaggeration if I say that I know more about what some of the artists I follow on social media eat than what they're actually working on. And this, of course, isn't something that's exclusive to artists. I mean, you can't open a social media app without seeing the newest travel photos of someone you follow. And while being kinda annoying, one might argue that it's not that big of a deal. It's not like they're hurting anyone, right? Well, wrong. And I'll tell you exactly why I think it would be better if all of us were a bit more mindful about these things. I think this year alone I've traveled to 6 different countries, but hardly any of my fans and followers know about this. And it's not that I have a problem sharing things about my personal life on the internet. I often do. You can see my trusty companion Miu all the time if you're following me. It's just that I'm very aware of the fact that not everyone is as fortunate as I am. And the reality is, most artists, professional or not, aren't. I mean, most people aren't. And the last thing I would want is for anyone following me to feel bad or be envious. Apart from the fact that 99% of the time it paints an absolutely wrong picture of how the lives of those artists look, it certainly would in my case, it's also very irresponsible. It creates false expectations, which I will talk about more on the last point, but it also completely ignores the fact that there are thousands of artists who can't afford to travel around the world and eat at fancy restaurants, who bust their asses and still struggle to make ends meet. It drives me crazy when I see how some artists actually only post all the adventures they're having and all the different countries they're visiting, and maybe occasionally they will post something they're working on. I know that some people actually like to see what their favorite artists are up to and what they are doing, and I admit that on the flip side, it's sometimes nice to share some personal stuff and also the extraordinary things in your life. I mean, sharing is caring. But when you're an artist and people follow you for your work, and maybe even for your guidance, I don't think that it's appropriate to constantly show off how successful and cosmopolitan one is, and to effectively rub it under people's noses. It's actually really simple. Be a bit more humble and be a bit more mindful when sharing these kinds of things on the internet, and most importantly, no one needs to hear how jet-lagged you are. Number 2. Red Dot Mania. This is another social media related habit that I'm sure most of you come across quite frequently. Every now and then you will see a post of one of the artists you are following showing you one of their paintings with a tiny red dot next to it. For everyone who doesn't know what that means, a red dot in the art world is the universal indicator that the piece you're looking at has been sold. So when you're seeing such a post, you're looking at a sold piece of art. But even if you didn't know what the red dot meant, I'm sure that the artist was considerate enough to add the word sold to the picture or place it somewhere prominently in the captions of the post, so as to make sure that you really get the message. So obviously what the artist is trying to communicate is the fact that a piece has sold. But that leaves us with the question, why? Of course, the reasons for this can be plenty. Maybe the artist is just starting out and has sold a piece of art for the first time and is incredibly proud and filled with joy and just wants to show it to the whole world. which I absolutely endorse by the way. But in my experience, this rarely happens. Beginner artists, young artists, and professional artists who aren't overly successful are often actually very humble. They don't have the need to share each and every sale they have. And I mean, why should they? I don't see other people posting how they receive their weekly and monthly paychecks. Now, all joking aside, this of course is part of the game. It's just as much part of marketing yourself as an artist as showing your work in progress photos or sharing photos of your exhibitions. But taken to the extreme, it can be one of the most annoying things. Some artists will constantly share every piece of work they sell, as if they are trying to prove a point. Every red dot must be captured, every sale communicated. Others won't post for months, and then they come out of the left field with a red dot photo just to vanish again after having delivered the message. Well, the point is, don't go overboard with these kinds of things, guys. Be happy and be proud about every piece of art sold. Celebrate it to your heart's content, but also remember that not everyone out there is as lucky as you are, and not everyone wants to be constantly reminded of that fact. Number 3. The artist you are trying to reach is currently not available. I'm just realizing that this again is something that is related to social media and the internet. But I guess this is hardly surprising considering how much of what we do in our private and professional lives is linked to the internet. Today almost every artist, be it professional or amateur, shares their work with the world online. And sharing your work also means connecting to people. And some are undoubtedly better at doing this than others. But then there are the ones who really don't get it. Because some artists have the habit of never responding to any of the interactions of their community. They don't answer questions, never read or even open their messages, they just share their work and life online and take it for granted that thousands of people take their time to like and share and comment on their stuff. And getting an email response by those artists is a bit like trying to get a doctor's appointment. It's not impossible, you may or may not get one, but either way, it's a pain in the ass. I mean, it's nothing new that artists tend to think that the world revolves around them. But this kind of hubris is not only annoying, it's also frustrating. To all the people who support you and want to connect to you as an artist, but also all the people who want to work with you. Almost all modern artists inevitably build communities around them. Fans, followers, admirers, and all these people are one of the reasons why anything we do matters in the first place. I strongly believe that if people take their time to write you a message or comment, you should at least read it and try to react to some of it. It's not only what decency commands, but it's also part of your job. Many of these people are customers or potential customers, and customer service, like it or not, is a vital part of being a modern artist. Now, I know that when it comes to comments, this sometimes is a practical issue. Depending on the size of your following, the amount of questions, messages, and inquiries can be overwhelming. And you obviously can't react to all of it, but you also don't need to. You're by no means obligated to answer every question or the same question for the 100th time. I don't answer the questions that I have answered 100 times before and that can be found with a quick search, and I also don't answer the questions where people ask me if I use oil paint. Usually in the videos that include oil painting somewhere in the title, by the way, but I generally try to respond to questions within the first couple of hours after I post something, and I usually tend to respond to longer messages. Even though we can't react to everything, especially those of us who get hundreds of comments and messages every day, I think that it's important that we at least try to react to some of it. So I guess this is just a long way of saying don't be that kind of an artist. People want to connect to you, and every artist should be grateful for that. Give some love back and let your community know that you appreciate them by being more than a robot posting on the internet. And for the love of all things, please read and respond to your emails. Before we get to number 4, and oh boy, this is the big one, I want to quickly thank today's video sponsor, Squarespace. I've been using Squarespace for my online portfolio for years now. So when Squarespace recently reached out to sponsor the channel, it was an absolute no-brainer. Having a great online portfolio where you can showcase your art is a must for every artist today, and Squarespace is perfect for that. But Squarespace also offers an integrated commerce and shop system. that is incredibly easy and intuitive to use. And I can't even begin to tell you how much easier this made my life in recent years. Launching products and processing orders couldn't be easier. So if you're looking to make your own website or want to have a great but easy to manage online store, check out squarespace.com for a free trial or go to squarespace.com/alpay to save 10% of your first purchase for a website or a domain. And that brings us to number 4 on our list of annoying artist habits: keeping it not so real. This is not only the worst and most annoying artist habit in my opinion, it's also one of the biggest contributors to most of the problems the art world is currently facing. And it's relevant for everyone who is or wants to become a professional artist. Do you know how much a piece of art of one of your favorite artists costs? Well, probably not, because while they love to share photos of their sold works, what they don't love to show is prices. If you ever want to see an embarrassed artist, just ask how much money he or she is making, and I guarantee you the reaction will be delightful. Or have you ever wondered how artists can travel so much and be out all the time and still manage to get anything done? Well, that's usually because you don't get to see the bleak and lonely days and weeks in the studio. Or have you ever noticed that artists never tend to speak out on controversial topics, problems in the art world, or just the difficulties of being an artist in the 21st century in general? At least not openly, which is actually quite funny because I can guarantee you that when a bunch of professional artists comes together, they hardly talk about anything else. We talk about how we hustle from one day to the next, but never openly. We talk about the problems between galleries and artists, but never openly. About money, pricing, the illusions created by social media, but never ever openly. And the problem is not only the lack of transparency and communication, it's also that most of what you hear and see is smoke and mirrors. People ask me all the time how they can get more followers. But why? What do you think a follower is worth? Do you have any idea why you want that to begin with? Sometimes people think followers translate to money, but it's not that easy. Things are much more complicated than that. Or people ask me how to get into a gallery. But guess what? The problem isn't getting into a gallery. The problem is selling a piece of art once you're in one, and then to keep selling. I strongly believe that if we aren't honest and transparent about these things, the only thing that happens is that we create a bubble that's filled with half-truth and unrealistic expectations, and those kinds of bubbles eventually always burst. Communication and honesty is one of the most important things in interpersonal relationships, private and professional. And if we don't communicate the reality of our situations and openly address issues and important topics, we can't expect to change the status quo. Right now, what many or even most artists choose to do is to not get involved. Or they send the wrong messages, or they leave out the most important parts of the message. And that is really annoying. Guys, as you know, I love to talk. I could talk about these kinds of things for hours on end, but I would love to hear your thoughts on this topic. What are some of the artist habits that you find most annoying? Please share your thoughts and ideas in the comments down below, and yeah, have a good one.